As human beings, our nervous system is hardwired for comfort, whereas the essence of what makes us, some would say our soul, is hardwired for growth. And it's managing that dynamic tension between how good a comfort zone feels and the innate calling of our potential that lies outside of that causes the frustration for most people and keeps them on that hamster wheel of mediocrity. No one can ever love us more than we love ourselves. We are all creatures of habit. We're using our conscious brain only a small amount of the time, that critical decision making. The rest of the time, like 95% of the time, is what I call people sleeping awake. Let me give you another example, another analogy. The mind is like a compass needle. In fact, it can only point in one direction at a time. But when we're operating from that 5% of the time where we're conscious and using free will, we can grab that compass needle and we can point it anywhere. That's what free will allows us to do. And if we're feeling down, we can go choose to watch a comedy or call a friend who can cheer us up. And if we're feeling low on energy, we can go put the kettle on and make ourselves a coffee or a drink. But 95% of the time, we're not doing that. And as soon as we let our hand off of that compass needle consciously, it will always drift back to its default magnetic north, which unfortunately for most people is more negative than positive. Environment trumps will. Our intention will always be beaten by our environment over time. For example, let's say that you're a music fan, but you don't like jazz. You're kind of a country and western kind of guy or girl. And you listen to country and western in the car going to work, but your car's broken down this week, so your good neighbor around the corner that works at the same place has offered to give you a lift. So you're going to share the 45-minute drive to work and back for the next 5 days. But they listen to jazz. Now, I don't care what you think consciously. Within 3 days, I know what's going to happen. Within 3 days in the car, you're tapping your feet to the beat. Within 5 days, you're humming it in the shower. You see, we don't get to choose whether or not we get programmed. We're programmable by design. We can only choose how we want to be programmed. Another way of saying that is you can have all of the intention to be as warm and hot as you like. You can raise your body temperature. You can put on some big clothes. But if you choose to live in a freezer, the environment's going to win over time. In other words, you can read all of the positive affirmations. You can stand in front of the mirror and say that you believe in yourself. But if you live with somebody who is constantly pulling you down, somebody who is reminding you of why you're not good enough and why it won't work, at some point you're going to start to believe it. It's the law of conformity. If you hang out with 9 recreational drug users, I've got news for you, you're most likely going to become the 10th. It's the 95% law, the law of conformity. There's 3 tips that I want to share with you that'll help turn this around. The first is, stop putting the wrong things in. You see, as I said, we are adaptation machines. Our bodies, our physical bodies adapt to our environment. We don't get to choose that. We only get to choose the environment we put them in. If it's the gym or McDonald's, the body doesn't care. Its job is to adapt. But it's the same with our mind. So stop putting the wrong programming in. In other words, if you think of the 2 biggest things that impact us unconsciously more than anything else, it's the mainstream media and our peer group of who we hang with. Let's touch on the media for a second. Now, for those of you that still think that the mainstream media is about reporting the news, I've got news for you. You're in Disneyland. See, the job of the media is not to report the news. The job of the mainstream media is to stimulate another part of the brain called the amygdala, which is designed evolutionarily to notice negative before positive, so that they can hook your attention out of the mass of the crowd and record you as a viewing statistic to justify rate cards and advertising. The media is not a charity. And so you cannot watch the news and be positive. It's like saying, I want to be healthy and I smoke. If you're being programmed by the mainstream media, you can't have that default magnetic north move away from being negative. It's constant programming. People say, well, how do you know what's going on in the world? I'm like, you kidding me? Everything's going on in the world, but the media want to take your little flashlight in your hand and point it and say, oh my goodness, look at this. It's a snake eating a rat. Versus you saying, yeah, but have a look at this hummingbird being born. So it's a choice. So stop programming yourself with why the world won't work and start taking charge of where you point your flashlight. Now, the second thing, start putting the right things in. Now, we live in a time in society where there's so much great information, whether it's a podcast, whether it's inspirational interviews, whether it's books or the lives of some of the people we looked at earlier. Every single day, or at least every single week, If you want to take your compass needle and start remagnetizing it in a positive direction by exposing yourself to the kind of information that supports your potential and your greatness and where you want to go. Now, there's no excuse for not being able to do that now in a society where it's so available. But if you're not choosing to do that, by default, you're going to be hooked into somebody else's agenda. And if you don't start filming as the star of the movie in your life, by default, you're going to end up as a film extra in somebody else's. And then the third point, get the things that shouldn't be in there out. What do I mean by that? Work with a decent mentor or a coach that understands how to navigate the minefield of human behavior. Somebody that isn't just going to teach you skills, but somebody that can reach in and find those unconscious patterns and be able to rip them out for good. You see, when we're able to start addressing things like our unconscious programming, when we start to create the best habits that we can by programming ourselves consciously, when we start grabbing that compass needle and bringing it over to the right direction so that the 95% of the time we're sleeping awake, we're able to be who we need to be, that's when we can start to achieve the real game in town, which is self-mastery. And when we commit to self-mastery, we give ourselves the best shot of becoming the best and greatest versions of ourselves that we can be. And then we get to become the example and the invitation to others. Not the imposition. Nobody changes because you tell them to. People change because they're inspired to change. And we can only inspire them by being the example and the invitation. And at that point, we have a chance of being able to really make a change in this world, make a difference, which is what the world needs right now. And ultimately, be the change you wish to see in the world.